Okay, hi. Um, so my name is Karen Patchen. Um, I am welcome to my project presentation. This is the influence of religion of beliefs, behaviors, and attitudes. My section name is APST 207.5501, Practical Statistics. My instructor is Kara Hoofman Wood. My semester is um, Project Spring of 2025. Um, so I chose the topic of religion, beliefs, and behaviors. I've always been interested in how religion influences people's values and how these values might differ on someone's background, lifestyle, experience. I wanted to explore the belief in God and religious practices to relate these things like parenting, gender, sexual orientation, and even overall well-being. So that's what I'm going to do now. So the variables I have selected for my project are primarily religious related variables such as belief in God, religious preferences, and the attendance, and compared them to personal and demographic factors like gender, sexual orientation, parenting, and the subjective well-being measures. I wanted to see whether religion is associated with how people feel about their lives and identities. Starting off, we have the belief in God. So as you can see here, we have the frequency table and the graph that I have created. Um, the majority of respondents believe in God without doubts, while smaller percentages believe either believe with doubts or are unsure. The distribution shows that belief in a higher power is still dominant in the present population surveyed. So then we have our frequency attending religious services. As you can see here, our biggest percentage is once a year, every week. And then it drops down to once a year. And then it continues to drop down from once a year to several times a year to 2 or 3 times a month, and then to once a month, and then we have once a year and nearly um, every week. As you can see, um, it shows that the belief in a higher God doesn't exactly affect how many people attend religious services. Of course, it does, but not as much as you would think. Moving on, we have has children or not. So this percentage I found very interesting myself. You can see that it was the data that has been collected of the SPSS output. Um, the highest percentage is 66.4, and that is the one with one or more children. Um, and then it drops down to a 33.6 for a respondent has no children. And that's very interesting to me because the difference between having a child and not having a child is only 30% difference, which doesn't seem a lot, but to me that's very interesting. And then, we move on to identifies as a heterosexual. So we have gay, lesbian, bisexual, and then we also have heterosexual or straight. Now, at this time, I do not believe that this is exactly the same percentage today, but moving on, with the data that has been collected, you can see that at 92% people identify as a heterosexual or straight. And then we drop down very so much to 8% for gay, lesbian, or bisexual, which is very interesting to me to see how that has changed from then to now. We're almost most of the people I meet have known someone that is gay, lesbian, or bisexual, or are themselves gay, lesbian, or bisexual. Moving on, yeah, we have a female for the SPSS data. Um, as you can see, this is a very close tie with the data that we have today. At 54.2% is a female, while a male is 45.8%. That is not a lot of a difference, but it definitely shows me are, how willing females are to fill out more information than males, if that makes sense. Then we move on to kind of less of um, very easy going answers to general happiness. Now, at a 50.7 percentage is pretty happy, which is pretty good if you ask me. Then we move on to a 30%, which is very happy. The difference between pretty happy and very happy isn't a lot in the word usage. Um, and then we move back on to um, not too happy, which is in a 19.3, which at that time they could have not been too happy with themselves or with something that's been going on. It's just very general, as it says. And then we have the satisfied with life. And to me, this is very kind of nice to see. At a 44.2% is very good with their satisfaction with life. And then it drops down 20 to a 26.1%, which is good. Which, it's always nice to be very, very, very good and good with the satisfaction in your life. That's what I want to have at the end of the day. And then it drops down to an excellent, which is at 18.6, and then a 9.5 at fair, and 1.5 at poor. Now, the difference to me is very interesting because people could be unsatisfied because they didn't win the lottery today, or they had to deal with something that they didn't want to deal with. So it's not like they could have put their satisfaction with life for that day, not for their whole entire life. And then we have self-rated mental health. Now, looking at these numbers, I'm very happy with the mental health for the SPSS data is very high. At a 38.5, we are very good. And then it drops down to a 27.4, which is good. And then an excellent, which is at 22.2, and then a fair at 10%, and a poor at 1.9%. Which I understand, again, it could be situational or it could be like fully not happy with their mental health. Now, for test one, I compared the belief in God by parental status. Um, so the SPSS output shows a statistical difference between the belief levels that those who have children are more likely to strongly believe in God. This supports my alternative hypothesis that parental status may influence religion belief, which is very kind of nice to realize. And then we have test two. Now, this compared religious preference by gender. Now, seeing as there's not a lot of data that I have shown, the test results showed that there is a significant difference in religious preference between males and females, which helps support my alternative hypothesis, which is there is a difference in religious preference between males and females. On to test three. I looked at how often people attend religious services based on whether they identify as heterosexual or not. The results show that the heterosexual respondents attend more frequently on average, and this difference is statistically significant. This supports the idea that religious behaviors may vary based on sexual orientation. Now, moving on to the correlations. We have correlation number one, which is the belief in God and the religious attendance. This correlation tested whether strong in the belief in God is associated with more frequent religious attendance. The result was a strong positive correlation, meaning that people who believed more strongly in God tended to attend its services more often. This supports my one-tailed hypothesis. Um, Moving on to correlation number two, the belief in God and heterosexual orientation. I tested whether the belief in God is related to identifying as heterosexual. The correlation was positively and statistically significant, suggesting that heterosexual individuals are more likely to report a strong belief in God. Moving on to correlation number three, this final correlation looked at whether people with children attend religious services more often. The results showed that a negative correlation with the no kids variable, indicating that people with children attend services more frequently than those without children. Now, my key conclusions are belief in God is strongly tied to religious attendance. So, talking about this, um, and demographic, so these findings were very interesting to me because the belief in God is strongly tied to religious attendance, meaning that people that believe more in God are going to show up more in church, which makes sense as you understand. But people with children tend to be more religious, tends to kind of confuse things a little bit. Um, I believe that if you believe in God and you have children, you're going to bring them more to church than people that don't have children and don't believe in God. Same way with people that don't have children but still go to church. Now, the religious engagement varies across sexual orientation and gender is very interesting to me because the way it could always change. Um, the way that the pastor or the preacher or the way that church phrases things towards sexual orientation and gender can change the religious engagement that happen inside that church or that place or anything like that. So it's very interesting to me to see the difference and how things could change through time. And the last one, religion remains a strong factor in shaping personal values and behaviors. I agree. I agree. Religion is a certain thing that you have to believe with your own chest. It's hard for you to have to do it. Um, so this to me is really interesting to explore how deeply these patterns run through the data. The data we have is, numbers and things like that, but correlating it to something like religion that I'm very passionate in is very interesting. I'm going to continue to explore this as much as I can outside of this class. I've loved being in this class. It's been very interesting and to see how statistics are done with like mental health and those like articles that you read online and those videos that you see. So it's very interesting. Thank you so very much.